HubSpot, which is an AI-powered analytics company. My guest today is Aishwarya Lakshmi Shankar. And welcome to the show, Aishwarya. Terrific to have you here. And I was really looking at the fact that you've had almost 17 years of experience across many different kinds of companies, but predominantly a lot of talent development work, which is really the most fascinating thing. Talent and technology is what we talk about here. So this is the perfect segue for me to really, discuss with you how do we learn from why onboarding becomes important for leaders and at all levels. Just for the benefit of our guests, Aishwarya also told me that she enjoys traveling, reading spiritual books, and taking care of her two boys. That's her life. So she does have a life outside of work as well. And what's been your favorite spot to travel to?
So many, Abhijit. It's hard to pick one, but if I were to pick one, I think it would be Europe. Just the vast myriad of cultures and the cobble streets, the scenic beauty. I think I can just go on and on about Europe.
In India, which is your favorite travel spot?
In India, I think it would be definitely the Himalayas. The
Okay.
beautiful mountainsides always brings a sense of peace and tranquility. That's one that I keep visiting every now and then.
Sure, sure. How did you get started in HR, and what was the first role that you did? How did it progress? Tell me about that.
Sure, sure. So, Abhijit, I have a background in psychology and I have a master's in HR. And I think, the natural progression for me was to really be in a people centric role. So I started my career with Tata Consultancy Services. It's an IT services company that's global in nature. And I joined them as the campus recruit. And that was my first job. And, I started out as a business partner in a large, what we would call account in TCS. And so I was providing, people support to about 7,000 employees across the globe and based out of Chennai. And that was my first exposure in HR to a large company that had, all your people processes set in place and a great place for me to build my foundation in HR, I would say. Learned a lot. And I think within 1.5 years, I had the wonderful opportunity of leading talent management for the entire retail vertical. Again, something I think that was the first time a fresher had the opportunity to lead such a big function for a global setup, and that was very exciting. So that was my first foray into talent management.
What
Uh,
did you learn in that role? When you sort of moved from campus to this large breadth canvas, what did you learn?
I think for me, the biggest learning was, how do you do some of these processes at scale, right? Because doing talent management, your performance management or your talent development, or, thinking about high potential talent, when you do it for smaller scale companies, it's significantly different. But when you do it for a large company, I think scale is super important, and that's where I think I learned what tools and technologies you can leverage for some of your people practices, and how change management and communication is so important as you drive some of these large complex projects.
Give me an example of where change management really made a difference to the business.
Right. No, absolutely. I think when I worked at a scale up, right, that was the first time we had to reimagine our entire performance management process. And up until then, I think the company was used to just having one annual appraisal, and people would just go and load it in a tool which wasn't kind of supporting, that scale that we were experiencing. And that's where I think I had the opportunity to reimagine from the lens of the employees and from the lens of the leaders and all the business stakeholders, right? What is that amazing performance management process, which is kind of holistic, that looks at all different lenses and really looks at also the employee experience as we drive that. So when we did that process, I think it was very important for us to look at it from different, different players in the entire process, right? We ran a survey with employees to understand, how frequently they wanted feedback, for example. Were they
What did they
happy?
say?
So they said more feedback, the better, right? So that's when we said instead of an annual appraisal, maybe we should have a quarterly check in process. Because when a company is rapidly growing and evolving, it's very important for employees to understand where they stand with respects to their performance, right? So we got this ask from the employees, and that helped us co-create this entire process. And we also checked in with the leaders because leaders obviously have to be selling, have to be building products, right? We're taking precious time away to focus on their teams, right? So we asked leaders, how frequently are you willing to give feedback in the survey, right? And leaders came back saying maybe once in twice a year, right? Not as frequently as once a quarter, but not so, I would say, not so later in the process as once a year, but they said maybe twice in a year. So we came up with a process which was two mandatory check-ins, and which are more like biannual, and two check-ins which are more like optional, right? Employees can request for that, and managers can have those check-ins. So that was one where we did a lot of campaigns with employees. We had a lot of focus group discussions with different business leaders. We brought together a cross-functional team to really co-create that entire process and make sure that there was ownership from everyone as we rolled out that new process.
I want to, spend some time now trying to understand your experience of onboarding, which that's what really got me interested in having you as a guest, and I want to really spend most amount of time really talking about that.
Right.
What was the trigger that got you to think about onboarding new hires, especially senior leaders?
Yeah.
So because the belief is that a lot of times in organizations, the belief is this person is a senior leader, they work for X number of years, so there's nothing to onboard, they can figure it out, they're pretty quick on their feet. So why did you decide to break the norm?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the most important periods of time in a leader's career is when they make this crucial transition into a leadership role, right? And when we talk about leadership transitions, it could be a manager that steps into a leader's role, right, for the first time. Or it can be a manager or a leader taking on a new team, or it can be the one that's most common where a leader joins a company, he or she is joining a new company, right? And I think the first 90 days are very critical for both the leader and the company, right? That is really the time the company is also assessing the fit of that leader, and the leader is also learning the ropes and eager to make sure that they have an impact and they have a great start, right? And today, I think in the world of business, with so much changing and so much disruption happening, I think the expectation from the complexities of the leadership role are really that the leader comes in and hits the ground running from day one. And I would say in my career, I've just, onboarded so many leaders across different levels, right? And the challenges are slightly different depending on the scale of the company, depending on the level of the leader, and so many learnings from each of these different experiences. And I've seen places where leaders have succeeded, And I've also seen places where leaders haven't necessarily been successful. And, there are definitely learnings for HR practitioners from both these experiences, right?
When you say
So,
that, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please go ahead, complete.
no, I was just saying it's so important, and I'm so glad we're having this dialogue because integrating a leader into a new organization it cannot be a more important aspect of the entire journey.
At which stage do you, how do you go about designing leadership onboarding process? What do you do? At which stage do you start? Is it after the interview when you've made the offer and the person is agreed? Is that when you decide it, or do you have like a standard process? Is it customized? I have so many questions.
Right, right. I would say, nowadays what I'm seeing is the whole onboarding process has evolved quite a bit. And typically, what has worked well is when you on start onboarding a leader as soon as they've accepted the offer, right? And you would see that in India, typically leaders have close to 2 to 3 months of notice period that they have to serve. And what we have observed as HR practitioners is a lot of times leaders don't even end up joining the company, right? So starting the onboarding process as soon as they have accepted the offer always gives us that additional engagement and always feels makes the leader feel more involved in the entire company and the process. So we've seen some success in terms of just engaging with leaders as soon as they accept the offer. And typically, when I say we start onboarding, I think the immediate manager plays a crucial role in really successfully onboarding the leader, right? And where I have seen success right from onboarding new CXOs to VPs and senior executives is once they accept the offer, you start engaging with them, and you start talking to them about the company's vision. You start talking to them about the customers. You start brainstorming about what is ahead as soon as they join the company, and that's
Who is doing this? Is it the leaders to be boss, or is it HR? Who does this conversation?
typically I think it's always worked when it's the leader's immediate manager, because that person is invested in the leader's success in the first 90 days, right? So we've usually seen them front end this process.
And when you talk about the potential, do you talk about the team? Do you talk about only work? Do you talk about the people processes? When does that happen?
Yeah, I think typically there are a few areas of discussion for the leader. It starts with giving them a sense for the team. Who are your A players? Who are the influential players on the team? Right? What is working with the team and what is not working with the team? And this is also a great opportunity for the manager to let the leader know of potential open roles that they can start thinking of candidates for. So usually what happens is when leaders are aware of all the openings on their teams, this is also an opportunity for them to start thinking about tapping into their networks and making sure, they are able to get the team in place if they have to succeed in the first 1 year. And then there's a lot of discussion about what is working in the function that they are going to take on. What are some challenges, maybe some discussions about why the current incumbent is not able to meet those expectations, and what is expected from this leader to fill some of those gaps.
When you tell the to be leader, to be new hire, when you tell them that, well, here are your A players, here are the people who are not doing well, isn't that unfair to the team? Because sometimes there is a chemistry between a certain individual and the manager which is not working, and maybe this person, if he or she comes in with a clean slate without any prior bias, this older employee may get a fresh chance and may actually succeed and become an A player as well.
I
So,
have, I have in fact seen that happen, right? And I think that's where, there is no one size fits all approach. In some cases, I've seen that leaders don't want to meet the outgoing incumbent because they want a fresh start. In some cases, I've seen that leaders want that transition time where they want to get a perspective from what has worked and what has not worked. So I think there are different combinations. We got to kind of tweak based on what the leader really kind of prefers and what is the context. And in some cases, I've also seen success where you don't necessarily talk about the team ahead of the onboarding process, and you let the leader come in and assess for themselves. That has also worked. And I think in some cases where there's clarity for the business organization that this team is not performing and there is a need for a new team, I think in those instances we've seen that when you're able to articulate why this team is not working, that also gives the leader a lead time to really think about how they want to structure that team, who are the new people they want to bring on board. I think these kind of reflections happen when you kind of present about the team.
if I were to just summarize a couple of things that we talked about so far, you're saying that as soon as the offer is accepted, the leaders to be manager, the new hires to be manager, starts engaging with the new hire, gets them on board with the plans for the business, some of the new areas that they are thinking of, the kind of potential opportunities that are there, and also to talk to them about some of the vacancies that are there in the team, so that the new leader might sort of think of building a couple of people in early enough so that the lead time is shortened. So that's one of the takeaways that I had. The other thing that struck me as interesting is you also share a profile of the team to understand that, well, here are the A players, here are the people who are not necessarily working well, but there is no set plan to that, because sometimes people do want to know that ahead of time because they might take immediate action. In some cases, it's people want to come in and assess for themselves. Both, I think, should be possible. um, I want to now switch to another element, which is, some people advise that you go with a transitions coach. And some cases, companies don't want to do that. My own view is, when you hire somebody at a senior level, there's a huge amount of investment that's being made in terms of the cost of the employee. And the sooner you are able to onboard and get this person to start operating full steam with the full potential, the faster it is the organization starts recovering that cost. Uh, but at the same time, organizations very often think that they would not spend any additional money on, say, an external coach. What is your view?
I think having an external coach is definitely helpful. While it is a cost for the company, I believe there is value in doing so, because when you have a neutral third party coming in, I think there's always a lot of trust that the newcomer builds with this person. Especially, I think it's helpful if the company has a track record of having this individual, who has worked with different leaders in the past. So there is that element of, this person understands the culture of the company, understands the ethos, understands, what great leaders look like in the company, and therefore is able to help this person onboard and assimilate well. And we've seen that it's been successful, and in some cases not so successful as well.
What do you look for when you are choosing a transitions coach? What are you looking at?
Right. Definitely, I think one of the first things that we look for is, how many people have they coached, right? And have they coached leaders in similar companies, right? Companies of our scale, companies in our industry. Do they really understand the industry, and the challenges of the organization. So I think these are big criteria for us.
And when you have found the transition coach, what's the role? How long do you engage the transition coach for?
Typically, I would say anything between 3 to 6 months. And I think that again is dictated by how soon the leader is able to assimilate. Some leaders would like to, avail of the coaching services for slightly longer, beyond 3 months. In that case, we've also engaged with people for about 6 months. But
And
usually I would say 3 to 6.
when does the transition coach start engaging with the new hire?
This engagement always happens after they've joined.
All right. So the person has joined and within the first week or month or something, or is it on day one? When does the person come in?
It's usually after a week, once they've kind of settled down, that's when we start the engagement.
And how often does the coach engage with this new hire?
Typically, I think the coach engages once in 2 weeks during the course of the time that they are engaging with this new leader. And again, sometimes it's a bit of a hit or miss. The leader is not available, they're just ramping up. And so sometimes the engagement could be a little delayed. But, our recommendation is for them to connect once in 2 weeks.
And when you have this kind of an engagement, is anybody else in the organization privy to this conversation? Does anybody shape this conversation in the sense that would the new hires manager be involved with the transitions coach? Would HR be involved with the transitions coach? What is your recommendation?
Right. Usually, the HR business partner is involved in working with the transitions coach. And again, we just want to make sure that the process is successful. We maintain confidentiality, which is very critical for the success of this engagement. And therefore, this leader closely works with HR to just see if there's anything HR can do to really improve this engagement. But otherwise, I think for the rest of the company, I don't think anybody is closely involved.
So it is almost the transition coach who's an outsider and
Yes.
HR together are working to make this new leader successful. So there are things that you need to enable inside the organization, which the HR leader could do. There are things that are, perspectives that, you can put together and help the new leader make sense of so many things that they are seeing. That's where a transition coach can come in handy. I can see the first 90 days book right behind you in that blue cover with 90 days written prominently just above your head, and I couldn't help noticing that. Uh, Besides this book, I mean, did this book actually get you to start thinking about a transitions coach, or did you always know that?
I think definitely this book helped. And, I always knew that there was a need for a transitions coach. And it just kind of accelerated my interest. And I think that's when, in my previous company, we hired our first transition coach. And we saw some successes. So, I think it's been a good practice so far.
When you look at where HR is and the role of HR in a tech firm, you've
Mhm.
had some experience with IT services as well as technology, and tell us a little about what ThoughtSpot is all about. What do they do, and what are you working on today?
Sure, sure. It's an exciting time for ThoughtSpot as we speak. We just had our new CEO join us a couple of days back from Salesforce. And ThoughtSpot is an analytics company using natural language processing. We, basically help companies become a more data-driven company. So it's in the analytics space, very disruptive, and we are using AI to really elevate our game right now. And very exciting time to be at the company. And right now the company is also investing a lot of efforts and time in building out teams in India, and that is what makes this role very challenging for me.
What's been the most exciting thing that attracted you to this role?
Right, right. So, ThoughtSpot started in the US in 2012, and the entire leadership team is based in the US. And I think sometime last year is when the company wanted to think about how we can leverage more of the talent in India. A lot of companies in the West are now building out teams in India. There are so many global capability centers that are being founded in India, and this is a great time for really thinking about how do we take advantage of all the great talent that's available in India. And I think that was really exciting for me to really help the company with this next phase of growth in identifying great talent in India and really elevating different functions within India. It was predominantly an R&D team that was there in India, but right now I think there's renewed focus from GTM functions, from other core functions to really build out their teams in India as well.
You worked in very large firms as well as smaller firms. What is the difference in the role if you were to sort of advise somebody who's got a choice between opportunities with a large firm and a smaller firm? How does the role of HR change in this?
Sure. I think, fundamentally the role of HR is the same whether you go to a very large organization or a very early stage company, right? But I would say the experience is slightly different in large companies versus small companies. In that, in a large company, most of the processes, the policies, the HR initiatives, all of them are in place, right? Anything that HR is going to contribute is going to be more incremental. That being said, in a small company, I think there's a lot more opportunity to really deliver impact. In a small company, you work very closely with leaders, with executives, and you're really able to shape the talent agenda from grounds up based on the business priorities. So if you're someone who likes a fast paced environment, who likes to deliver impact, who likes to really work on large projects, but at the same time see them through, right? The small or scale up companies are, great places for you as a HR leader, right? If you're somebody who likes very large, very complex projects, but not necessarily leading them end to end, I think a large company is one where, you would be more successful.
So, is the choice of a large firm or a smaller firm, is that dependent on the person, or is that dependent on the kind of things that they want to work on? Is it a personality fit or is it a skills fit? What do you think is the answer for somebody who's just getting started in their career? What should they be looking at? How should they take a call? Imagine, at least for a moment, if we assume they've got a choice between a very large established player versus a startup, what would you suggest they do?
I would say, just reflecting on my own experience in my career, right? Working in a large organization always gives you a good understanding of HR, right? Because everything is set in place and you go in and you understand what are the various facets of HR. You understand what is the operating model of HR, right? And once you've spent a few years going through different rotations in a large organization, you have a complete 360 view of HR. And once you have that foundational understanding, I think you can always move to a smaller company or a scale up, and you could definitely leverage that learning in this experience.
Thank you very much. We are at time, and I want to just appreciate your spending time and walking us through your terrific experience in helping leaders transition successfully, through the use of a transitions coach and to work with senior leaders and help them as they are new in the role. That can be a very powerful thing for all of us to keep in mind. And appreciate your joining us on the Talent and Tech Show. With that, goodbye and see you again.
Thanks, Abhijit, for having me today. It was my pleasure to share my experiences with you and the audience here. Thank you.